Have you ever been called ungrateful just because you decided to prioritize yourself? Have you ever been accused of being selfish for simply saying no? Well, sometimes all we want is a little peace, a place at the table, a hug without demands, an acknowledgement that doesn't come with a receipt. But when you spend your whole life saying yes, your absence becomes a scandal. That's exactly what happened to me. My name is Edith Carter, and for a long time, I was the kind of mother, the grandmother, who solved everything with money, with silence, with sacrifice. I financed smiles and suppressed my own desires. Until one day, a simple family dinner revealed a painful truth. I was never invited. I was just tolerated. And that day, something changed. For the first time in 77 years, I stopped trying to be needed. And I started being true to myself. This story is not just about a betrayed mother or a forgotten grandmother. It is about the breaking point, about the exact moment when you understand that giving too much without limits is also a way of losing yourself. I didn't fight. I didn't slam doors. I just cut off the flow of money, of expectations, and of excuses. And what happened next completely changed my life. Maybe you are there, on the other side, thinking that it is too late. That time has passed, and that there is no going back. But let me tell you something. It is never too late to choose. It is never too late to say, enough. And if today you feel like you are erasing yourself for the sake of others, take a deep breath, because this story is for you. With each chapter you'll listen to here, I want to invite you to reflect on what true love is. Love is not dependence. It's not obligation. Love is caring with presence, not transference. Love is when someone wants you for who you are, and not for what you pay. And if you've never had the courage to draw that line, maybe this is the push you needed. So prepare your heart, because what comes next is not drama. It is real life. It is reunion. It is choice. And above all, it is the story of a woman who was considered cruel, just because she decided, for the first time, to put herself first. It was supposed to be just a family dinner. Nothing fancy, just a simple meal, some light laughter, maybe a cake at the end. Edith had put on her most understated navy blue, fixed her hair, and looked at herself in the mirror with that simple glow of someone still waiting to be welcomed. But what came was not an invitation. It was a rejection. A short, cold message, with no room for doubt. You're not invited. My wife doesn't want you there. It hurts more when it comes from the one you love the most. Edith waited years for signs of affection, and she received 8 words that dismantled a lifetime of dedication. It wasn't just a denial, it was a door slammed shut. Not a phone call, not a sorry, Mom. Just the silence cut by a cell phone screen that now hurt more than any scream. Garrett, her son, had chosen the comfort of his wife over the presence of his mother. For a moment, Edith thought it was a mistake. She even imagined that perhaps the number was wrong, or that someone had taken Garrett's phone, but it wasn't. The tone, the coldness, the disdain, it was all his. And once again, she fell silent. What can you say when your very existence becomes inconvenient? She sat there, unable even to cry, as if the rejection needed time to penetrate your soul. At that moment, she didn't think about confrontation, fighting, or venting. She only thought about everything she had given, all the dinners she had paid for herself, all the bills she had paid for, the smiles she had faked, the holidays she had spent alone, but with her credit card up to date. She was the silent foundation of the family, and suddenly she had become a nuisance, as if her presence was overshadowing a harmony that had never really existed. The cruelest pain is the one that no one acknowledges. Edith felt this when she looked at the wall, still holding her cell phone. It wasn't just disappointment with her son. It was the collapse of an illusion that she herself had nurtured for years. The kind of love that is given hoping that one day it will return. And when it does, it comes with a price. She didn't want a red carpet, just a seat at the table. And she wasn't even given that. Every minute that passed brought a new memory. Garrett's first uniform, the sleepless nights nursing his fevers, the advice she gave before interviews. And it all weighed heavily on her, like a book full of beautiful pages that suddenly ended up blank. as if her story had only been useful up to a certain point. After that, she was disposable, invisible, inconvenient. It was there, in the silence of that kitchen, that something began to change. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity. Edith understood that she could no longer continue begging for love where there was only interest. The message did not destroy just one night, it destroyed an entire narrative. And when that happens, you have two choices: keep quiet or start listening to yourself. And it was through this internal listening that she began to chart a new course. That sleepless night, Edith found herself surrounded by memories and receipts. With each piece of paper pulled from the drawer, a forgotten sacrifice was brought with it. It was a college check, a payment for renovations, a help for a business that turned into a profit, but never turned into gratitude. She didn't just help, she supported. And no one seemed to remember. Even the brochure for the new house, which she had helped pay for, was still carefully kept, as if it symbolized a shared dream that ended up being hers alone. Edith realized something painful. She was the invisible foundation of a family that remembered her only as a number in the bank. What she called love was more like disguised dependence. She had always thought that giving was the way to keep the union together. But deep down, she had bought space in a family that tolerated her only as long as she was useful. When she stopped to look at the papers, she didn't just see transfers, she saw emotional transactions. It's not easy to see this, because a mother always wants to believe that love is enough, but loving shouldn't mean giving up. Edith began to ask herself, when was the last time someone did something for her without expecting anything in return? When was the last time she was seen as a woman and not as a provider? These questions echoed in the kitchen like silent screams, and deep down, she already knew the answer. The curious thing is that her awakening did not come with anger. It came with lucidity. She did not want to punish anyone. She did not want to collect debts. She just wanted to stop being the only one carrying the burden. After so long being out of sight, Edith lit a candle inside herself. She began to see everything with different eyes, and that kind of clarity, when it arrives, cannot be unseen. How many times had she spent Christmas alone, but paid for someone else's turkey dinner? How many times had she heard thank you that seemed more like formality than affection? She knew. She knew every time she had covered up her hurt feelings with smiles. But that morning, something changed. She grabbed a mug of tea, sat at the table, and stared at the pile of documents as if she were reading her own story. A story of love with no return. And when you realize that you've been used, even with smiles and sweet words, there's no turning back. Edith wasn't just a tired mother. She was a woman who had been strong for too long, strong enough to be forgotten. And now, at 77, she was finally ready to remember herself. Not as a supporting character, but as the author of her own life. That moment of silent awakening was more profound than any fight, because it involved no shouting or arguing, just the truth. And the truth, when it comes like that, soft and firm, has the power to turn the key. Edith realized that it is never too late to rescue herself, and that was the first seed of what would come next. The next morning, Edith woke up early, but not as heavy as before. She drank her strongest tea, as if preparing her body for a serene battle. She sat down again at her old desk, the one that had already held decades of papers, and pulled out the documents that had a first and last name, Garrett Carter. It wasn't revenge. It was determination. For the first time, she was going to protect herself, not just financially, but emotionally. He picked up the phone and called the bank. The voice on the other end of the line sounded hesitant, as if he couldn't believe that a 77-year-old woman was about to suspend her 174 automatic payments. But Edith knew exactly what she was doing. Every debt canceled was a broken chain. Every authorization revoked was a step toward her own freedom. When she asked for the power of attorney to be canceled, her air felt lighter. It wasn't easy. Her hand shook, not with doubt, but with pent-up emotion. When she hung up the phone, she felt as if she had removed an invisible backpack she'd been carrying for decades. The room fell silent, but it was a different kind of silence. Not of loneliness, but of power. For the first time in a long time, Edith was the only one in charge of her own life. And that, for her, was a revolution in itself. She looked out the window. Outside, the street was quiet, but inside, everything was changing. It wasn't just about stopping the payments, it was about stopping the cycle of endless giving, of love that came with demands, of bonds that felt more like handcuffs. Edith understood that love without limits becomes a prison. And no one, not even a child, has the right to trap someone with conditional affection. It's funny how a decision that is small in the eyes of others can be huge for someone who is experiencing pain. Edith didn't make a fuss. She didn't announce anything to her family. She just started to change. And true change happens this way, from the inside out. She wasn't looking for applause, she was looking for peace. And that peace would come from the courage to finally say no. After she hung up the phone, she typed a short message to Garrett. Now it's your turn to pay what's owed to you. Simple, direct, no drama. No need to justify anything. She owed nothing. For years, she'd supported everyone else. Now it was time to support herself. And this change, though silent, made more noise than any argument. This was the first time Edith had chosen herself so clearly. And it's not selfish to put yourself first when you've spent your whole life coming last. That decision didn't close doors. It opened paths. Because when you stop expecting recognition, you start recognizing yourself. And that changes everything. Garrett didn't take long to appear. He rang the doorbell loudly, in that impatient way that sounded more like a demand than respect. Edith opened the door without smiling. He entered without waiting for an invitation, as he had done with his mother's finances. Out of habit, out of convenience. But now, something had changed, and he sensed in the air that he was no longer as welcome as before. "What's this, Mom?" she asked nervously, trying to sound in control, but with desperation seeping through the lines. Edith didn't get upset. She walked to the kitchen, put some water on to boil, and calmly replied, "You know what it is." Garrett stood, looking around, as if she expected the room to answer for her. But Edith no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. When he sat down, she placed a cup of tea in front of him. He didn't touch it. "Did you cancel everything?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "All 174 transactions?" Yes. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything that had gone unsaid for years. He had seemed like a lost boy, but Edith was now a found woman. "Why?" he insisted. And Edith, looking him in the eye, spoke firmly. "Because you uninvited me from your life, Garrett. And now, I'm just obeying." There was no hurt in her tone. There was clarity. And perhaps that was the hardest part to swallow. Garrett had expected yelling, drama, maybe even tears. But what he got was restraint. Cool, calm, and necessary. He tried to argue. It was Marissa. She was nervous that day, but Edith cut him off with a question that cut deeper than any accusation. "Didn't you mean to shut me out? Or did you just not want to deal with the consequences?" He didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew. He knew he'd let his wife make his decisions for him, and that now he was paying the price. Edith didn't make a scene. She just said, "For years I was there, always. But my support became an obligation. My love became invisible. So today, I stopped." Garrett tried to regain control. "But we have bills, loans. Toby has to pay for college." She just looked at him and asked, "And what have you done for me?" "That didn't involve a bill?" Silence answered for him. For the first time, Garrett realized that the mother who had always given in now chose to stay, and that the comfort of dependence was over. Edith didn't want to see him suffer. She wanted to see him grow. But for that to happen, she needed a pain he had never felt before, having to fend for himself. From that moment on, the game changed, and she was finally in her rightful place, in her own life. 2 days later, Toby, her eldest grandson, appeared at the door. His face said it all. Dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled shirt, restless hands. Edith greeted him with the same warmth as always, but with a new look, a look that saw beyond excuses. He fell onto the couch as if collapsing. "Grandma, I need help," he said bluntly. For once, Edith didn't rush to comfort him. She listened quietly as he explained. His credit card was blocked. His rent was late. His car was about to be repossessed. "I'm screwed," he said. She asked him how much he owed. About $7,000. And what had he done with the money? Toby looked away. Parties, trips, a new cell phone. No emergencies, no needs. Just choices, made without thinking about consequences, because someone else always picked up the slack. Edith took a deep breath. "You're working, aren't you?" He nodded. "At the insurance company. 2 years already." "Then explain to me, why haven't you learned to manage your income yet?" The question wasn't one of judgment, but of loving frustration. She knew part of the blame was hers, for never letting him taste responsibility. But now, it would be different. "I always thought that if something went wrong, you would help me," Toby confessed. And therein lay the root of the problem. Unconditional love had become a crutch. Edith walked over, looked him in the eye, and said, "I'm not your backup plan anymore. I'm not a bank. I'm your grandmother." He opened his mouth, perhaps to ask for another chance. But she was quicker. "This time the answer is no." The no fell hard, like a door closing. Toby insisted. "Just this once, I swear I'll pay." Edith stood her ground. "My love for you remains, but now it comes with limits." In place of money, she offered something better, a chance. "My attorney, Mr. Whitaker, is looking for an assistant, part-time. You'll answer phones and serve coffee. It's not glamorous, but it's dignified." Toby blinked in surprise. "You would do that for me?" Edith smiled, with a warmth that mixed hope and firmness. "I would, but not because you deserve to be rescued, but because you deserve a chance to grow." That moment, however uncomfortable, was a seed. For the first time, Toby heard a no that came from love, a love that didn't want to protect, but to prepare. When he left, Edith stood at the window for a while. She watched her grandson walk away and wondered if he would ever understand the gift he had just received. Saying no to someone we love may seem cruel, but sometimes that is exactly what saves us. Because true love does not provide a ready-made solution. It offers the path for the other person to learn how to build their own. That same week, Rebecca showed up, with a shopping bag, a light smile, and no requests. She wasn't here to be in debt or to be in trouble. She just came, knocked gently on the door, and said, "I came to see you, Grandma." Edith found it strange at first. It was so rare for someone in the family to show up without expecting something in return. But Rebecca had always been different. They walked into the kitchen together. While Edith put the water on to boil, Rebecca began unpacking her groceries: fresh vegetables, pasta, tomato sauce, some herbs. "It's not much," she said, "but I thought we could cook together." It was a small gesture, and yet a huge one. Because here, for the first time in a long time, someone had come to offer instead of ask. "Are you okay, Grandma?" she asked, as she chopped carrots. Edith stopped for a second, looked at that girl who had become a woman without ever ceasing to be sensitive. "I am. For the first time in many years, I really am." Rebecca smiled. It was a smile of someone who already knew, of someone who had seen beyond appearances for a long time. "I knew it. I knew you would be better off away from them." They ate dinner in silence. Not a tense silence, like so many dinners with Marissa, but a light, comfortable silence, like two hearts that recognize each other. Rebecca didn't bring up the subject of inheritance or recent decisions. He only talked about his new course, his small but charming apartment, the books he was reading, and Edith realized here was the family she had left. And that was enough. After dessert, Rebecca looked her grandmother in the eye and said, "You're doing the right thing, you know. I see how people treated you, especially Mom. She always lived well off of you and still made it seem like it wasn't enough." It was a sweet punch in the gut. Edith, inside, cried with relief, because finally, someone validated what she had always felt, and no one had ever said. "It doesn't take much to take care of someone, does it?" Rebecca said, putting away the dishes. "Sometimes you just have to be present." Edith smiled, her eyes moist. "You're right. Caring isn't about paying bills. It's about remembering a birthday. It's about calling for no reason. It's about cooking together, even if it's just pasta." It was the first night in a long time that Edith went to sleep with her heart warmed. Not because of hope, but because of presence. Before leaving, Rebecca held her grandmother's hand and said softly, "I'm here, always, not because of what you give, but because of who you are." Edith hugged her tightly. It was the kind of hug you don't just give, you give. And in that moment, she understood that, even with all the losses, she had gained something immense, the genuine love of someone who saw her, listened to her, and, above all, chose to be there. The phone rang again. It was Garrett, asking for a family conversation. His voice was tense, almost rehearsed. Edith agreed, with one condition. At my place, tomorrow, 2 o'clock, and no surprises. But of course, there were surprises. At 2 p.m., sharp, 3 cars pulled up in front of her. Marissa got out of the first car, dressed elegantly, with her parents, her sister, and even 2 friends, a small lobbying committee. Edith took a deep breath. When Garrett appeared at the door, he tried to justify himself. "They're worried." But she interrupted him. "This isn't a meeting. It's my house. Only those who have something real to say can come in." She pointed to the others. "They're staying in the car." Marissa tried to maintain control. "We're here to handle this like adults." Edith opened the door, allowing only her children and grandchildren to pass through. The rest, disconcerted, returned to their cars. The room became small, but it was enough. Edith sat calmly, her hands folded in her lap, and asked, "So? Who wants to start this circus?" Marissa, of course, took the lead. She spoke for long minutes, about how Edith's decisions affected everyone, about pensions, benefits, the future of her grandchildren. A speech based on numbers, not feelings. When she finished, Edith simply asked, "And at what point did I become the official sponsor of all of you?" Silence. Eyes lowered. No one had an answer. Edith then looked at Garrett. "How many times have you visited me just to see me and not to ask for something?" He hesitated. To Toby, "And you, how many times have you called just to say good morning?" He looked away. To Marissa, "What have you ever done for me, without expecting anything in return?" Her daughter-in-law opened her mouth, but no words came out, because there was no truth to speak. The tension rose. Marissa finally lost her temper. "This is manipulation. You're trying to make us feel guilty." Edith replied calmly, "No, I'm just telling the truth. For once." Marissa snapped angrily. "You'll regret this when you're alone." But Edith stood firm. Family is about choosing to stay, even when there's nothing more to gain from it. Finally, Garrett asked, "Do you want us to apologize? Do you want us to beg?" Edith shook her head. "I want you to grow up. I want you to understand that love isn't a utility bill or a credit card. I want you to learn to live without using me as a crutch." One by one, they got up and left, except for Rebecca, who stayed. Because sometimes, all it takes is one honest heart to heal the damage of a multitude. The morning after the meeting, Edith woke up with no weight on her chest. For the first time in years, there were no other people's bills to sort through, no silent requests knocking on her door. The kettle whistled, and the tea felt warmer, calmer. She was no longer the invisible support of the family. She was just herself, and that was beginning to feel like enough. The kitchen, once filled with reminder notes and calendars from her grandchildren, now had flowers in the center of the table. Edith began to devote time to the small pleasures that had previously been out of her routine: embroidery, soft classical music, and endless reading of novels. She bought an adult coloring book and discovered that drawing calmed her thoughts. Simple things, but deeply restorative. She resumed her walks in the park where she used to walk with James. There, the silence was welcome. The shade of the trees was not heavy, but rather embracing. Time slowed down. Edith learned to walk slowly without feeling that she was being left behind. For the first time, the clock was hers, and not someone else's. Her days became lighter. She received few visitors, but those that did come were genuine. No requests, no emotional blackmail, just presence. Rebecca would come sometimes with a pie, other times with a long hug. No one showed up urgently anymore, or with a bill in hand, and curiously, Edith didn't miss them. At the local church, she started attending reading and prayer meetings again. She became friends with Donna Hilda, who had also raised 3 children alone and now lived in a small apartment, but full of laughter. The two became companions in their walks and in silence. And Edith began to realize it was possible to rebuild a life without the ruins of the old one. It wasn't easy, nor was it quick. Sometimes her heart would waver. There were days when she would look at her phone, waiting for an apology. But even without that, she kept going. Because healing doesn't depend on the other person's response. It depends on you choosing, every day, not to go back to the place where you were hurt. And so, little by little, Edith was rebuilding herself. Not as the sacrificed mother, nor as the available grandmother, but as a woman, like Edith, with her own desires, small plans, but her own, and with a new conviction that it is not too late to start over, as long as the new beginning is whole and comes from the soul. Traveling to Italy had always been a long-time dream, a plan put off, put aside, because it wasn't the time. James spoke of Tuscany like someone describing paradise, rolling vineyards, golden sunsets, artisanal wine. But there was always a bill to pay, a child in need, a reason to put it off. Until Rebecca looked Edith in the eye and said, "Grandma, this is your turn." And she went. The flight was uneventful, but what was transforming Edith was more profound than any displacement. It was the feeling of doing something for herself, without guilt. The first coffee on the terrace came with silent tears, not of sadness, but of liberation. In the background, Lorene, her oldest friend, scribbled in a travel journal and smiled as she breathed deeply, without rushing. In Tuscany, every step was a reunion. Edith walked through the cobblestone streets and touched the ancient walls as if rediscovering forgotten textures. In a local shop, she bought a navy blue scarf, the same color as the dress she had worn the day she was rejected. But now it was not a sign of pain, it was a choice. It was elegance that came from within, not from the need to please. On a night when the sky looked like a hand-painted painting, Edith sipped a glass of wine and watched Garrett's name appear on her phone screen. In the past, she would have answered before the second ring. But this time, she just watched the screen go dark. It wasn't anger, it was discernment. The cycle needed to end, and she didn't need an excuse for it. As the breeze blew lightly, she whispered a silent toast, "To the woman I finally chose to be." And in that moment, she understood that freedom is not the absence of ties. It is the absence of invisible chains. She would no longer need to prove herself. She would no longer need to beg for a place at anyone's table. Peace now lived within her. Rebecca sent a photo of her new apartment with a simple caption, "Grandma, I made a room just for you." Edith smiled. It was all she had ever wanted, to be welcomed by those who saw her true value. Her granddaughter offered neither luxury nor dependence. She offered presence, space, reciprocity. And that was enough to warm one's heart. On her last morning in Tuscany, Edith looked at the horizon with tears in her eyes, not out of longing, but out of gratitude. The woman who had boarded that plane was not the same woman who was now drinking her last European coffee. She would return to her country, yes, but not to her past. And what she took with her was what time and wounds could not erase, the strength of someone who, even late, dared to choose herself. For many years, Edith believed that love was synonymous with limitless giving, that being a mother meant sacrificing oneself with no way back, no space, no voice. But time and pain taught her something powerful. Genuine love also knows how to say enough, and sometimes the greatest proof of affection is not insisting. It is walking away with dignity. She didn't stop loving her son. She didn't stop caring about her grandchildren. She just chose to stop putting herself aside to fit into their world. Because there is a type of tiredness that can't be cured with rest. It can be cured with decision. The decision to prioritize yourself, to rebuild yourself, to look in the mirror and finally recognize, I deserve more. And perhaps that is the true legacy Edith leaves behind. Not the money she invested, nor the house she helped pay for, but the courage to set limits, the firmness to say no, and the serenity to show that it is never too late to choose peace. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here, each story is a reminder you can still rewrite yours.